if you're not self-regulated and you understand the energy you're bringing into the room, then you're doing your team a disservice, because the phrase I like to use is aberration loves company. And if you bring anxiousness and overexcitement and overzealous behavior and manic energy into a room, your team will start to mirror that. And so I saw it time and time again where maybe a leader lacked self-confidence and their unwillingness to stand in front of a room. So what they create a fireside environment rather than stand and deliver and work on the skill to inspire trust and belief. Or the leader who is really nervous about delivering the next quarter results brings that energy into a quarterly business review or a monthly business review, and then all hell breaks loose and the team's scattered everywhere. Self-regulation and your tone is the most important thing that you bring into a room, into a meeting, onto a call, and just simply pausing and reflecting for 10 seconds. Say, where am I today? Where's my energy? What am I bringing today? That will change everything.
Welcome to Leadership on the Links, the podcast that showcases innovators in golf course management and the issues they face. I'm your host, Tyler Bloom. In Leadership on the Links, you hear the stories of people shaping the industry from their first swing to their dream match. You feel like you're on the course playing with your most inspiring colleagues, having great conversations, digging into insights and sharing a few laughs. Our industry is changing. As a leader, you need to keep up on everything from trends to technology to best practices. Together, we'll continue to build world-class clubs and teams. Let's get to it. Enjoy.
We started this conversation talking about just in general, different vantage points on executive coaching and leadership prior to hitting the record button. And we just got into a really fascinating conversation. You kind of hit on it right through, you cut through the BS, the old boys network, right? And sort of that mentality around leadership, around coaching. And I'd love to hear sort of your journey in leadership. And Scott, I appreciate you jumping on the podcast. It's a different voice. It's a different perspective. And that's why I wanted you on here. So take us through kind of your corporate journey and what you're up to today.
Well, thank you for having me, and congratulations on the success. And I do love the game of golf. It's not something that I play well, at least now. I used to play pretty well, but not anymore. So look, I'm just a small town kid from Indiana. I grew up in a town of 15,000 people. But what I learned pretty quickly watching my grandmother interact and kind of be the patriarch, the matriarch, the leader of our family, the insights I saw from her was that she just had this unique gift with people. So, however, I don't know if I was blessed to receive it or whatever it was. I learned how to treat people with my grandmother. And frankly, growing up in a small town in Indiana, we see your parents buy 2 homes on a handshake. I got exposed to financial services pretty early on in my career as an intern at John Carroll University in Cleveland. And I kind of became infatuated with that business and selling and what it looked like and how I could go about it. And frankly, I got probably overly enamored with the opportunity that it presented financially over the time. So I started as a financial advisor, didn't love being by myself. So I moved into it as an internal wholesaler, as an asset management company, external wholesaler. And then finally, I was tapped on the shoulder to lead divisional sales leadership and then national sales manager and business development. At one point, I got asked to be head of operations for a $250 billion asset management retirement company. I managed 1,200 people. We had 5 million customers. So I've kind of done it all. What really led me to this journey around, I don't necessarily view myself as a coach. I view myself as someone who sits in the trenches, practically speaking, with my clients to help them around messaging, story, selling, leadership. In short, I help leaders resonate. And that's the dynamic that I bring to the table. And I learned it from my grandmother. But I've had I had 32 years, plus or minus a month or two in corporate America as executive vice president level. And now I run my own consultancy and leadership development group. So it's been an awesome journey.
And for those that are listening, Scott and I met it was a little over a year ago in Nashville, an entrepreneur group meeting with this company called Brand Builders Group. And Scott was sitting right behind me and just, I don't know, picked up conversation right away. Yeah. I don't even know how it really started, but I just sort of admired what you were doing, partially because of my own flaws and weaknesses in communication. Well, this is a really interesting business model or a very interesting sort of approach to things. So I've enjoyed kind of following along and all the things you're doing. When you think about what you've seen now in your work, and maybe take us back even to what you were seeing when you were in corporate, of like some of the challenges that you saw other executive leaders, department heads, probably just your day-to-day person, what they were struggling with.
Yeah. So I'll share a story with you I'm not proud of, but it literally just happened not long ago, where I was at an event and I was working with a team, and this gentleman came up to me and he's like, "Hey, we worked together at XYZ company." And I said, "Oh, we did?" He said, "Yeah, we did." I go, "Who did you report to?" He said, "You." This was 15, 16 years ago. I was very, very early in my management career. And I had no identity whatsoever. And my idea of managing, because it was a manager, not a leader, was to rule with an iron fist. And I followed the model that was the playbook of the manager that I reported to at the time. And I was so mortified that I didn't recall who this guy was. Now, we all change physically over time. I have a lot less hair than I did back then. It's no excuse, but I think it just kind of painted a picture of what kind of manager I was. And I vowed after that experience in that, dare I say, toxic environment it was. But look, I had no individual determination. I had no kind of sovereignty over who I was, self-determination, whatever we want to call it. I had no identity as a manager. I just followed the leader, and it was a bad playbook. I shifted. I made a vow to myself, I am never going to be that person again. And I wish this guy who came up to me not long ago who could have seen the leader I became versus the guy I started out with managing people. And I think all of us as leaders really want a few things, right? We want to be admired and respected and trusted. We want people to follow us. We want believers that believe in the vision of our company and what we're trying to accomplish. We want a good team, a collaborative environment. We want to create really positive energy. I did just the opposite when I started. I created a toxic work environment unintentionally because I just didn't know any better. But unfortunately, what I've seen is that problem kind of persists. It wasn't unique to me as a young manager back in the day. It's something I see quite a bit. A lot of it isn't the fault of the manager or the leaders, because they just haven't been taught the right way or haven't been guided or directed. But the implications it has on individuals and teams is pretty dramatic. And so when I set out to start my consultancy and my business, like, how can I serve the earlier vision of myself? And then when you met me, it was like, well, I was an anxious guy because I had panic and anxiety when I was in college, my first panic attack. But it's evolved to much more than that. It's like, how do I serve that earlier vision of myself that didn't have bad intention, just didn't know what to do? When we really think about high performing, and when you have an organization that's operating on all cylinders, and I'm sure some leaders are listening to this will connect with this, like, you just feel that energy. It's palpable. And I call it resonance. But how do you create that environment for your team to create an environment where you trust and empower and believe in them, guide, direct? So that really is what motivated me to do all of this. And so obviously, as you can experience and testify, when you go through an entrepreneur journey, you start one place and then you end up another, and it's the courage to start, not what you're doing necessarily. Like, that's really, I think, defines entrepreneurship, is the courage to actually bet on yourself. That's the journey I'm on right now. And so I've really kind of settled into a sweet spot, I think.
I love it. I mean, it's inspirational. And I kind of think before any management leadership can sort of inspire others, they kind of need to learn how to manage themselves. So it sounds like sort of the journey you've taken. What's the first step any listener that's listening can take to reduce that sort of, I hate to use the word invisible anxiety,
Yeah.
but show up with presence and sort of take ownership for themselves?
Well, I think that self-regulation, and we could define that in a lot of ways. The word I use in kind of how I've structured my content, and when I'm working with either advisory capacity or workshop, is I call it tone. But this self-regulation, and maybe it's even more self-awareness, like, really stepping back and saying, okay, what type of leader do I aspire to become? The three words I use are words I've used now for 10 years, or more than 10 years, actually. When I leave a room, when I leave working with people, I want them to say three things about me. Whether they say it or not, Tyler, there might be other words, but I want them to say, he's lofty, he's playful, he's wise. Those are the three words. That's the impression I want to leave people. But if I am running from meeting to meeting, which we often do, I've got 700 things going on at home. We had two Division I athletes. I was in two different cities on most of for 4 years or 5 years during my formidable corporate years. Like, you got a lot going on, but if you're not self-regulated and you understand the energy you're bringing into the room, then you're doing your team a disservice, because the phrase I like to use is aberration loves company. And if you bring anxiousness and overexcitement and overzealous behavior and manic energy into a room, your team will start to mirror that. And so I saw it time and time again, where maybe a leader lacked self-confidence and their unwillingness to stand in front of a room. So what they create a fireside environment rather than stand and deliver and work on the skill to inspire trust and belief. Or the leader who is really nervous about delivering the next quarter results brings that energy into a quarterly business review or a monthly business review, and then all hell breaks loose and the team's scattered everywhere. Like, self-regulation and your tone is the most important thing that you bring into a room, into a meeting, onto a call, and just simply pausing and reflecting for 10 seconds. Say, where am I today? Where's my energy? What am I bringing today? That will change everything. Just those 10 seconds, couple of breaths, ground yourself, and then engage your team, because your team is they follow the leader. People want to be.
Well, I hope nobody on my team is listening, because I think of what you just said, chaos bringing in. There's a running joke that's like developing is, we say squirrel because I go in left field and I go in right. That's happening. So unfortunately, I resonate with what you just said, because self-regulation is something I have had to really, really work on, not just in my previous role, but currently. I always kind of joke that people think I got my crap together. I'm like, you have no idea. You had to sit on a Monday team call with our team. So,
well, and look, it's, again, like, there's so many, the thing we brand builders, you and I both love everyone there, and the people we've met. Rory says all the time, you're most uniquely positioned to help the person you once were. Well, the person I once was a guy who didn't know how to lead, a guy who didn't have a clue, who was riddled with panic and anxiety, and who has ADHD. Like, that's who I was. And so,
client then, I guess.
Exactly. So I had to learn through, a lot of ups and downs and bumps and bruises, like, what imprint was I leaving on my team? And what I finally realized, and again, thank goodness it was quite a while ago, that if I showed up with a steady hand, and no matter what was happening around me, that my team knew that they could always look to me as the anchor. Like, if I was having a bad day, or we had a death in the family, it doesn't matter what it is. We could count 1,000 different examples of what could happen. But I always wanted my team to look at me and said, he's got his act together. Now, that burden that we carry on our shoulders is a lot. So that's the other counter to this, is like, I did feel and often felt like I was carrying the weight of the world. And so now there's millions of ways to cope with that, or hundreds of ways to cope with that too, but neither here nor there. But that's the vision I had for myself as a leader, man. I wanted people to say, hey, no matter what's happened, I very rarely lost my cool. Not never, very rarely lost my cool. I always tried to be measured, direct, lead with honesty, but people knew what they were going to get from me. And I think that's the thing that I saw from great leaders that I worked with and really poor leaders. And I've had my fair share of both. That's what I'm bringing here, is just kind of a connection of the best hits, frankly, that I've been able to accumulate through really good mentorship.
I love it. And I like the fact that you can point to that there's some mentors and people that inspired you to come to this. And I think recently for myself, I was sitting in a executive meeting, and there was a little bit of a unrest you could tell within the group. And the leader of the pack, let's put it that way, just sat there, listened, watched everybody, spoke softly but powerfully. And I said, if I could emulate my future self, it's that guy right there. It's right there.
It's perfect. And that's how it happened with me, honestly. My mentor, who I worked for almost 3 decades, his name is Bob, or is Bob. Bob's still with us, but he gave me the phrase assumed acceptance. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? He's like, you walk into the room and you assume that you're accepted. My trajectory through corporate was pretty steep, and there were very few rooms early on as I got to the SVP level and the executive VP level where I felt like I belonged. I'm just a simple kid from Indiana. I got 860 on my SAT. Like, I don't belong in this room, but I did. And when I started to realize that I belonged, then things started to change. And when things started to change, then I could start to be my true self as a leader. And that's what people were drawn to, where people would seek to be on my team, seek to be a part of my organization, because I was myself and they knew what they were going to get. There was a consistency and a rhythm to how I led, which I'm really proud of, frankly, as you can probably tell. And I not share this from a position of arrogance. I share this from a position of gratitude and humility. So that's what I aspire to create with teams and leaders I work with today is like, let's work on what and who you want to become, and let's work on what and who you want your team to become. And the two can be connected. And when they're connected, beautiful things start to happen and performance starts to improve. And you don't have this quiet underbelly of counter-attention and politicking that takes place if everybody's aligned.
There's a couple, man, we could take this conversation a couple different ways, but one thing that has stood out to me right now is you've been there, like you've been in that position where you're juggling different responsibilities. You've had your own internal doubts, and then you sort of reposition who you wanted to be as a leader. What's a simple daily habit people can implement to sort of stay grounded in that thought? Because it's easy to revert back to old habits and hard to stay disciplined on who you want to become.
Yeah.
So what are some simple habits that people could use to kind of stay grounded in that, who they want to become?
Well, I think the first is what I mentioned earlier is like you do a tone check every single day. Where are you on this continuum? But it's always against the future self. We talked a little bit about Ben Hardy before we jumped on the recording. Like the future needs to inform the present, not the past. And the thing that I said, if my 3 words of my ideal self are lofty, playful, and wise, then everything would always be tested against that. Not using as eloquent terms as Ben uses, but the way I thought about it is like I would create an ideal scene for my team, for my organization, for me professionally, personally. What does that look and feel like? And it was a very emotionally driven thing. Like I didn't want it to be all data driven. Like I had objectives and multi-billion-dollar quotas that I had to hit or not hit. So I wanted to take the numbers out of the equation. Like those were just given KPIs and OKRs and all the important statistical measures, quarterly earnings, whatever it might be, profit. Mine is emotional. Like, one of the first exercises I always did with my teams is like, let's do a headline exercise 5 years from now. What's the Wall Street Journal going to write about us? To cover the Wall Street Journal, they're writing about us. What is it going to say? Because I wanted to ground everybody in what this shared experience could be together. And so when you ground people in the shared experience, I wanted to be consistent with what I felt like the ideal scene was. So I wouldn't guide and direct them per se, but I said, look, how can I connect to that? And what version of myself is going to be required to lead a team that gets to this? And very, very rarely, Tyler, did we not achieve those objectives. Very rarely. Because we got everybody knew the game. Everybody knew the expectations. Everybody knew the role that they had inside the game. And everybody knew with Scott, we know what we're going to get. He's already laid it out. This is the vision. This is the ideal scene. These are the expectations. Everything we do should inform that. And so, I guess in some way I was maybe doing what Ben's teaching today before Ben defined it in a beautiful way with science of scaling, but I was doing it in the construct of an intrapreneur environment. Like I knew I belonged to a big Fortune 100 company or Fortune 500 company, but I'm like, I've got to create my own unique sense of who I am and who I want my team to be in this construct.
I love that. That's really, really powerful. And I feel I can look back internally myself. I wish I would have had that sort of advice or that framework, 5-10 years ago. When you work with teams, and I know we'll give some information towards the end of the podcast of where people can reach and find you, but one of the things you lay out for people that you work with is sort of your speak framework. Why don't you kind of go through that and sort of the steps of that and how people how you help companies or help leaders work through that?
Yeah. Well, so speak are some elements, but maybe we just elevate it a little bit. I've redefined it and I call it the resonance edge now, which is really 3 very important pillars: clarity, tone, which we've talked quite a bit about tone today, and then resonance. So clarity is about how we communicate as a group. How do we making sure that we have message precision and intent behind everything we do, that we clearly understand that when we're communicating to audiences, whomever those audiences might be, that we understand their needs, their wants, their concerns, their fears, what motivates them. And then we're catering our communication to them. Because what I found, and my mentor Bob used to say this, I didn't quite understand it really until just a couple years ago, that whoever has the calm has the control. The way in which we communicate, and if we communicate with clarity, then we can influence and we can manage and control what we're trying to accomplish. So I guess that's step 1 is clarity. And that's not just in how you communicate, but that's how you act and interact with each other. The second is tone, which is that emotional energy, alignment, and regulation. And then lastly is resonance. And that's probably one of the more important elements that I think about is that how do we think about resonance? And when I think about this in the construct of a team, do we have radical honesty? Ray Dalio uses the term radical transparency, and I love that. But I think radical honesty is a step elevated in terms of how we are interacting with one another. Do we create a shared experience that we're aligned shoulder to shoulder, that we're top down, but also side to side, and we're all marching in the same direction? Are we working towards a common cause? And do we have felt alignment? To me, that's resonance. So we dissect that a lot of different ways, Tyler, but I think it's about how you communicate, but it's also about how you lead, how you interact, what's your mindset, how you interact with clients. So it's an application that we use in a lot of different ways when I work with teams.
There's, again, a lot to unpack here on that. When you think of the one area that makes a serious difference in how their team stay focused, if there's one element, what would that be that you'd say?
Clarity. Chris, you got to be clear. Again, going back to brand builders, they said diluted focus, diluted results. The same as how we communicate. If we're not clear with our communication, and if everybody doesn't understand that, if it's not repeated by everybody in the team, you can feel this in an organization. I knew when I would take over a new team or the organization that was maybe underperforming, they say, Scott, go fix this. I knew when things started to shift, when other people started to repeat my message. That's when I knew. I'm like, okay, now we've got momentum. Now the energy is where we need it to be. When people in other areas, other functional areas, other departments, whomever it is, starts to use your language, then you're on track. And so when you're clear and you repeat it, it's like, lather, rinse, repeat, say it again, say it till you throw up, say it more. Like that's the mindset we have to have as leaders, is that our people understand one voice, many echoes across the organization is the most important thing. No doubt about it. If you're not clear, nothing else matters.
Rachel on my team, when she gets a hold of this, she's going to call you up and be like, can you get on a call with Tyler? Clarity is needed. And I think that happens with changing organizations, right? I mean, you're constantly redefining what the goals, what the targets are, right?
That's right.
And how do you manage that, right? I see that even in not just our operations, but I see it in golf course operations where it's like the goalpost is constantly changing, right?
Yeah.
And give you context, really the last 3 to 5 years since COVID, golf's booming. It's going really well.
Yeah.
Memberships are full. There's waiting lists. Expectations are through the roof. The people are charging more now to play golf than join these clubs, right? So it seems like the target's always moving. How do you keep clarity and have clarity when the goalpost is constantly changing?
Again, the future state informs the present. And if you have a sense of what you're trying to accomplish as a group, as a team, as an organization, it doesn't matter how fluid the environment is. The big picture is still the big picture. The ideal scene is still the ideal scene. The nuances around strategy versus tactics, really. So your messaging may change on a monthly basis, but as long as everybody in the organization's speaking from the same hymnal, okay. But if you keep the end game in mind, what is the objective of the long-term strategy in 3 to 5 years? What are we trying to accomplish? That everything that you're doing on a daily basis is informed by that vision versus what's actually happened in reality. And that's the thing I saw time and time again is the desire to shift from, if you limit the number of things you focus on, 3 versus 10, 3 versus 12, 5 versus 15. Most managers and leadership teams try to do too much. It gets diluted. The focus it gets shifted, and you're trying to juggle a lot of different things and variables. So the frequency of communication, whether it be monthly or quarterly, no less than quarterly, the organization needs to think in terms of like one voice, many echoes, and everybody's showing up and everybody's saying the same thing. And now the leadership team is just carrying the message that I know it sounds overly simplistic, but I think we tend to overcomplicate it and make it much more difficult than it needs to be.
Well, I'm going to have to put that note for myself here every morning when I wake up and what you just said. So I love that. When you think of something that I've really appreciated in this conversation thus far is just your authenticity. And it's not like you're throwing that around, but I'm now hearing that a lot in leadership circles and conversations. And from your work, what does it look like when a leader is authentically vulnerable, and how does it change the team culture?
Man, what a great question. I literally was just noodling that idea earlier today. Look, there's science around vulnerability. There just is. When you're vulnerable, you release oxytocin. People receiving your message release oxytocin. It's just a fact. Authenticity has become a bit of a cliche, and it's like a workplace bingo card almost. I like to say just be yourself, but sometimes you can't be yourself. Sometimes you you can't go into I couldn't go into a boardroom and behave in certain respects like I wanted to sometimes. And so, but being as true to yourself as you possibly can is super important. Having a clear idea of who you are, being uncompromising in that, but understanding that in certain environments, you're going to have to finesse who you are. And so it's like being consciously authentic for the situation, for the environment is so important. So no matter where I found myself, if I was going in to make a business case for the CEO, or if I was going in with my team, I was still going to have the same elements of who I am, which is the kind of Midwestern born humble kid. My intention behind how I said things would change, how direct I would be, but that goes back to what we talked about in clarity and around messaging. Like I knew my audience. I knew how I could start to shift the momentum in the room just based upon my intention, not compromising who I am. And so I think that's the thing that's the nuances around as folks find themselves in situations that maybe they're not quite comfortable with, or newer situations, rather than pulling back and retreating and like, hey, this is just going to require a better version of me, still me, better version. How do I make sure how do I make sure I'm impacting the other people in that room by being myself? I think that's how I would define authenticity.
Love it. Love it. And you just kind of hit on a question as a follow-up, but you already hit it, is how do you address that with clarity versus nerves, right? Because whether it's a board presentation, whether it's a high stake environment, customer service related issue, team related issue, like how do you handle that, like to get over the nerves? Because I think that's probably what constricts people, is in those moments being nervous and not diving into kind of what you suggested.
Yeah. Confronting. Not confrontation, but confronting. Like a thing will persist until you admire it. Look, you're talking to a guy who was anxious in just about every situation for the most of my career. Didn't matter where I found myself, I was anxious. Yeah, I just was. It was just the fabric. Only till candidly, Tyler, it's the last 12 months where I've really done a lot of work on myself personally, where I don't get anxious anymore, or very rarely, I should say. I still do, but not as much. But what I realized is that a thing will persist until you admire it. So I would embrace the anxiousness and understand that it's the moment, and you got to meet the moment. And this is an opportunity, and preparation. That's really, as you mentioned, the SPEAK framework, which I still teach in components of the Resonance Edge, but that's what that was birthed. That was birthed from needing to be so prepared because I was so anxious that's why I created what I've created. Like, how do I make sure when I step into that room, I'm ready? It's preparation. And then organizing myself in a way, my thoughts in a way that it doesn't matter what happens, I'm going to be prepared. I've anticipated every objection, concern, whomever's going to have. It's into my script. So I'm almost preventing the number of questions I'm going to be asked because I'm anticipating so well that I'm addressing it in that moment. I just did it through just sheer preparation. That's how I aim it.
Do you see leadership communication evolving over the next few years? And what do you think people need to be prepared for?
It's evolving, not because leadership necessarily is going to be changing, although there could be some major revelations around organizational structure. But there's just so much that leaders have to cut through right now with the constant chase of pain. You mentioned the golf industry, how much it's grown since COVID, like astronomical, nonlinear, exponential growth. But what about artificial intelligence and what's happening? You talk about exponential growth there, and what that brings, or the mindset that people have in terms of living and working in sound bites. There's so much that we as leaders have to cut through, which is why, again, I go back to the Resonance Edge and why it's so important. Like, we've got to be able to resonate at a different level because there's so many distractions that are occurring on a day-to-day basis with our teams and our organizations.
Love it. I want to shift gears to a little bit of a lighthearted fun segment.
Okay.
And we like to call this chip shots. All right. So you ready?
Chip shots?
Yes. All right. So if you had to pick your favorite foursome, who would it be with and where would it be at?
My favorite foursome. Gosh, great question. Well, it would be at Augusta National, which I've had the privilege of playing quite a few times. I'm very grateful there. It would be, well, Tiger Woods is kind of cliche, but that comes to mind. I think I would just want to just see him in his day, though, back in the day when he was like a pure flush ball striker. Like, that would be really cool to see and experience. Probably be some former presidents, as political figures, thought leaders. So let me think about maybe Henry Ford. I mean, he was a major change agent. And I don't know that Elon plays golf, but Elon Musk, I mean, that guy's just, political views aside, and I know they could be polarizing, but the guy is so innovative. I think that would be interesting.
All right, that's a group that I've not heard on this podcast.
I'm sure you haven't.
I love that. I love that. It's a fresh perspective. What's your favorite halfway house food?
Peanut butter and jelly comes to mind. It's hard to get a lot of places. Definitely not a hot dog, but peanut butter and jelly probably. I don't know. There's something about being outside with the peanut butter and jelly.
I like that. Again, this is a fresh perspective. I'm not sure I've heard PB&J. My girls would love that. My youngest loves PB&J. Actually, this is a really simple one. What clubs are in the bag?
TaylorMade.
What's your best club?
It's actually, ironically, it's not TaylorMade. It's a 2-iron from Titleist.
2-iron.
Yeah, it's a hybrid, 2-iron hybrids. But yeah, I love it. It just feels great. It looks good on the ground. And yeah, I love it.
What's one song that always gets you pumped before you're speaking?
Last Great American Dynasty from Taylor Swift.
All right. I think you're sucking up to my kids.
No, man. I love that song. I also listen to it when I'm docking the boat. We live on the river. So every time I come to dock the boat, that's the Great American Dynasty to T-Swizzle. She's awesome.
Swifty, another Swifty. I love it. Biggest leadership lesson you've learned the hard way?
I said earlier, be yourself, uncompromising, unwavering, just be yourself. And there are no regrets. If you're yourself, if you try to emulate somebody you're not, or you have somebody who's made such an impression on you and you try to mirror and mimic them, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And your team knows it.
Favorite sports metaphor that actually works in leadership?
Famous sports metaphor. It would have to be something around team first. I don't know if there's a metaphor per se, but team first. I mean, it definitely works. I mean, most of my lessons that I've learned the right and the wrong way have come from sport too.
All right, more nerve-wracking, hitting a tee shot on number 12 at Augusta National or speaking in front of 1,000 people?
With or without an audience at Augusta?
Either or.
I don't know. Again, I've been fortunate enough to play there quite a few times. So I would say speaking in front of an audience. Yeah. I mean, there's just something peaceful about being at Augusta National and walking those fairways. I always played my best golf there for whatever reason.
You're a pressure player, man. Let's get you in my scramble.
I don't know, but it's very forgiving course when you play it from the member tees. It's very forgiving. So I just liked it.
I'd have a few people listening here that are going to have to toughen that place up a little bit.
It's beautiful. The people are amazing, hospitable. The member that was kind enough to host me multiple times was lovely. Like, it's just a special, special, special place.
Well, I appreciate you coming on here. If people want to get to know what you're up to, learn a little bit about your coaching, your service offerings, where can they find you?
thescottramey.com is my website, but message me, DM me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest way to connect, and then we can schedule a quick call to chat.
Scott, I appreciate you coming on and the friendship. It's always fun to just where life takes you and the people you get to connect with, and I appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Tyler, thanks for having me, man. It's nice to see you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Leadership on the Links. For more leadership insights and industry expertise, connect with us at bloomgolfpartners.com or follow us on social media sites LinkedIn and Instagram. If you enjoyed this episode of Leadership on the Links, we'd be thrilled if you'd leave a review or share it with someone who you know would get some value. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to stay updated. Thanks for joining us today.